John, thank you for that long introduction. Let me apologize for that long introduction. I was hoping to just get up and say, hey, here's Dan Hicks. He's a Spaceport America dude, and he wants to talk to you. I'm really pleased to be here with you. I really feel like I'm living a dream right now. I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world, having a 34-year career with the Department of Defense, doing some pretty exciting things for our war fighters. And let me start off. Any men and women in service currently or prior service, any veterans that we have out here, thank you for all of your service. Let's start off with a big round of applause for our military. But for the last 2.5 years, when I retired and working with the space community, it is so exciting. And I want to start off with just a little historical clip real quick and then give a quick perspective on what that meant to me as a young boy.
Copying it down, Eagle. Steady base here. The Eagle has landed. It's one step to land.
So that last beautiful image was Spaceport America, where I have the privilege of being the leader of a great talented team. But going back to that clip, you know, we're all about celebrating the history of the Apollo 50th, 50 years ago, the landing on the moon. And thinking about it, I was 10 years old at the time. How many people actually remember seeing that? I was with my siblings, 6 of us. We were downstairs in the basement on this little black and white TV, you know, watching this incredible event, 50 years ago, and how exciting it is to be here today and tell you about where I think we're going as we go forward. But a quick perspective about those Apollo and NASA at the time. When I was a 10-year-old, I thought how cool that would be to be an astronaut. But it wasn't until later I realized how courageous and how brave, those astronauts and the agency really was when you think about how vulnerable they were. And that's kind of a quick theme I want to just quickly hit on. To be really courageous and brave takes doing some certain risks, accepting certain risks, calculated risks, but it's putting yourself out there, being vulnerable. And that's kind of a theme of what NASA did back in the 60s and what we're getting ready to do, what we call Space 2.0 with the commercial space sector and where we're getting ready to head. There's a lot of excitement happening, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today as we go forward. But again, hats off to NASA and the history that they set, to the Apollo astronauts, and we'll get going and start talking about a little bit more in the future. So the next slide deals with another one of the astronauts, Frank Borman, and he talked about the history of exploration, about how it's part of human spirit. And that's a neat perspective to have, because when you think about that and you think about what happens when you don't explore, if you pause or you falter or you don't continue to quest for knowledge, then you just kind of die down as a nation. And one of my favorite authors, James Michener, he's a historical fiction writer. He testified to Congress one time about the big civilizations throughout history, whether it's Mesopotamian, the Roman, or the British empires. Kind of what started, one of the factors starting their downfall was the fact that they started to stop exploring. They kind of dealt with internal issues and focused on them more than keeping a balance. And I think as we go forward as a nation, this is one thing that's important for us to keep going. And that's what's so exciting about the space sector right now, where the commercial sector is going, where the whole space industry is going, is it's allowing humans to continue to explore space and what we do. And that's important because there's incredible resources out in space that we'll need as humans. There's incredible resources, but there's also information and knowledge that we'll gain by exploring other planets like Mars on how to protect this beautiful spaceship known as Earth that we all reside on. So the continuation of exploration is so important to us. So this image that you see up here, the neat thing where I spent most of my career at is that goes back to the very first image of Earth's curvature. So back after World War II, when we brought all the V2 rockets, there's a good book called The Paperclip Game. It talks about how we brought these V2s back after the war, and we started using them for research, particularly the Navy did, launching out of White Sands. But the very first image of the Earth's curvature happened there at the White Sands Missile Range in southern New Mexico. That's kind of what started our birth of our nation's activity. And so now fast forward to where we're at going today, we're continuing to make history. And let's just pause for a moment again on this particular slide. It's kind of a neat perspective, but just think about transportation modes for a few minutes. Within the last 400 or 500 years, think of where we were, whether it was ships, sailing across the Atlantic, and then these convoys coming up from Mexico City to Santa Fe, this very historic Camino Real del Tierra Adentro trail that our Spanish went on, with ox carts and wagons coming up and on horseback, and then later on we had railroads, and then we have, cars, automobiles, highways, and now we have a spaceport located right on this historic trail that kind of goes, southern Colorado all the way down to Mexico City, and we're going to the vertical component going up. So just think about that for a moment, how exciting that is. Just within the last 500 years of humanity, we're getting ready to go up the vertical component into space. As we continue this area, this is just a little visual that gives you kind of another historical perspective, but it shows the importance of what we have here in this place. I talked about in that one chart how our partnership here in the Southwest will allow us to do some unique things. This chart just gives you a neat visual of the Tularosa Basin and the Jornada Basin where the spaceport is located. Two unique valleys that are ideally suited to support the commercial sector as we go forward. So those that haven't had the pleasure of coming down, let me ask real quick, how many have been to Spaceport America yet? How many of you have been to my buddy Dave Ruppel and the Colorado Spaceport? Well, as we go forward in time, there's an opportunity to get to these two neat spaceports much more as we go forward. But this gives you a good visual of the terrain and the neat environment that we have at that Spaceport America as we go forward, but also just gives you another thought about the rich history that this region has in space as now we move on forward, which I'll kind of focus on for the next 30 or so minutes as I talk. What I want to do is open this up towards the end, just to have any questions from y'all in the audience on anything about what the commercial sector, the civil space sector, and the national security sector is doing. One of the exciting things about my position now is I still have strong ties with the national security space sector, and what I'm seeing, there's a lot of synergy between the commercial space sector and where the national security interests and our civil interests are going with NASA, not just DoD. But three key takeaways from this next 30-minute dialogue is that our nation has set a clear tone on where they're going to be going as leaders to continue to lead the world in space exploration, but not just lead it, but also open it up for all humanity. And that's an important thing. We just started this National Space Council again. It hadn't been active in 25 years. Vice President Pence picked it up about a year and a half ago. And that's important that as a nation we have the National Space Council, and I'll talk to that in just a second. The second key takeaway of what's important is the commercial sector is really jumping into the space exploration. And I've got a few charts to describe what that means from venture capitalists, from the financial perspective of why that's the case. And then Spaceport America, New Mexico, this part of the Southwest with our partnerships, we're ideally suited to really grow the space industry throughout this Rocky Mountains on down into to New Mexico. So remember that as we go forward, and hopefully there'll be some questions as I continue this towards the end. Let's talk about the National Space Council. So think about, for 25 years, we didn't have that council. Shortly after, I don't know, sometime maybe in the late 70s, 80s, it just kind of died off. There wasn't a real push as a national focus of space. NASA was still doing good things with the space station, with a shuttle program, things like that. But about a year and a half ago, Vice President Pence kicked off the National Space Council. And that's important because now all the cabinet secretaries, Department of Defense, Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, they're all kind of aligned as an executive branch on clearly where our nation is going. And at the first meeting, it was kind of nice to know that they invited about 80 to 100 of the space community. We all got to go listen to the first one. Many of them presented. And then there's a clear policy on that our nation realized that we need to continue to explore and have a clear policy on what that means as we continue to go as a global community, but how we as a nation have space exploration, space access open to all humans. And so our nation kind of set the tone back about 18 months ago at the first meeting. The second one was kind of exciting about the regulatory environment and streamlining that environment. The third one was kind of exciting because that's when Vice President Pence and was told by the President at that meeting about he really wanted Wilbur Ross, Department of Commerce, to handle air traffic, space traffic management, situation awareness, to come up with a way of ensuring that all these satellites we're getting ready to launch to be able to support us in low Earth orbit, there's a good traffic management and situation awareness system in place. And so Wilbur Ross got that tasking, and then of course there's the fourth meeting that talked about a little bit more clarity on Moon, Mars, beyond, our exploratory spirit as a nation. And then what was really neat in Huntsville a couple months ago when we were there, that's when Vice President Pence was talking about the timeline of getting to the moon. 9 years, that's too long when the technology probably allows us, and with the right funding amount, to get there in 5 years. So that's when Jim Bridenstine, the NASA administrator, was kind of publicly tasked. You need to have the next woman and the first woman astronaut on the moon in 5 years, along with the next astronaut for our civil space sector. So Jim got the guidance. Administrator Bridenstine is marching out, and I'm going to show you something about where he's at right now. I need video for that. And then what's exciting is this Saturday I'll be at Kennedy Space Center. It'll be interesting. There's going to be another announcement. Vice President Pence is going to come out and talk to us for a little bit about where we're still going. So it's neat that at the nation, at the federal level, we have a strong council going, because that's important as we go forward with the space commercial sector too. I'm going to show this video. It's kind of after Jim got the word of a clear direction. This is kind of one of their NASA videos that can explain it much better than I can.
50 years ago, we pioneered a path to the moon. The trail we blazed cut through the fictions of science and showed us all what was possible.
Very pretty out here.
Today, our calling to explore is even greater. To go farther, we must be able to sustain missions of greater distance and duration. We must use the resources we find at our destinations. We must overcome radiation, isolation, gravity, and extreme environments like never before. These are the challenges we face to push the bounds of humanity. We're going to the moon to stay by 2024, and this is how.
This all starts with the ability to get larger, heavier payloads off-planet and beyond Earth's gravity.
For this, we designed an entirely new rocket.
The Space Launch System. SLS will be the most powerful rocket ever developed.
And with components in production
And more in testing?
This system is capable of being the catalyst for deep space missions
we need a capsule
that can support humans from launch
through deep space and return safely back to Earth.
For this, we've built Orion.
This is NASA's next-generation human space capsule.
Using data from lunar orbiters that continue to reveal the moon's hazards and resources,
We're currently developing an entirely new approach to landing and operating on the moon.
Using our commercial partners to deliver science instruments and robotics to the surface, we are paving the way for human missions in 2024.
Our charge is to go quickly and stay, to press our collective efforts forward with a fervor that will see us return to the moon in a manner that is wholly different than 50 years ago.
We want lunar landers that are reusable,
that can land anywhere on the lunar surface.
The simplest way to do so is to give them a platform in orbit around the moon from which to transition.
An orbiting platform to host deep space experiments and be a waypoint for human capsules. We call this lunar outpost Gateway.
The beauty of the Gateway is that it can be moved between orbits.
It will balance between the Earth and Moon's gravity,
in a position that is ideal for launching even deeper space missions.
In 2009, we learned that the moon contains millions of tons of water ice.
This ice can be extracted and purified for water. It can be separated in oxygen for breathing or hydrogen for rocket fuel.
The moon is quite uniquely suited
to prepare us and propel us to Mars and beyond.
This is what we are building.
This is what we're training for.
This we can replicate throughout the solar system.
This is the next chapter of human space exploration.
Humans are the most fragile element of this entire endeavor, and yet we go for humanity. We go to the moon and on to Mars to seek knowledge and understanding and to share it with all. We go knowing our efforts will create opportunities that cannot be foreseen. We go because we are destined to explore and see it with our own eyes. We turn towards the moon now, not as a conclusion, but as preparation, as a checkpoint toward all that lies beyond. Our greatest adventures remain ahead of us. We are going.
We're going.
We are going.
We are going.
We're going.
So that's got to get you excited. You know, in 5 years, we're going to be on the moon, and then we're going to go to many other places that humanity's going to need as we continue forward as humans here on Earth, and how do we understand our Earth and just the other planets. I'm going to change from the national level to that second bullet I talked about, the commercial sector and what's changed. And this has kind of been a change just in the last 2.5 years that I've been in this position. About 18 months ago, it's almost like Wall Street and the financial sector really got involved and started to realize what the space sector can do and what it can mean to us. In that middle bullet there was a study that was done by Merrill Lynch, Bank of America. They spent about a year doing a study, and in 2016, they indicated that there's about 340-some billion being spent around the world. But of that, they projected about 25% of that is governmental spending. The other 75% of that is a commercial sector, which is always good for any sector when you're not totally using taxpayer dollars to go forward and spend. So over the last 18 months, what I've noticed now is there's even more excitement with some of these technologies, and I'll show you some what we're doing at the spaceport. The fact that some of these technologies didn't have venture backing a few years ago, now they do, is very exciting for us in the space community. So about 10 years ago, you had these visionaries like Sir Richard Branson and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bigelow all doing certain things. Now you have so many of these other startups with venture capital from Wall Street. So that's important to know, and the spending continues to grow. I think the latest study is there's over 400 billion of what's happened just in the last year. The other neat perspective about that is the majority of that commercial sector is going to be in the small sat. There's a neat panel earlier this morning about the small sat, CubeSat, microsat industry and what's going on and getting capabilities to low Earth orbit. And that's important for us to consider why that's neat, not just me as a spaceport and the economic engine, but the fact that there's capabilities that will unlock in low Earth orbit that we don't have today. Imagine just the capabilities of internet connectivity around the world, where think about right now, humans on Earth, about only 10% of us are connected to the internet, either through our smartphones or laptops. Think about the power of the brain trust that's out there in humanity when we're able to tap another 90% of humans on Earth, where everybody has access to information and the internet. And so certain constellations of comms devices up in low Earth orbit will allow us to get there in a few years, and all of the future applications that will be able to be designed that we use. Many of us on our smartphones now, when we get into traffic somewhere back east or up in California, and you realize, okay, I'm taking another way. All that is from a timing signal coming down from the GPS satellites. There's so many applications. Each one of us touch a satellite 36 to 40 times a day. All the banking transactions that happen go through a timestamp that comes down from space. So we rely on it today, and as we go forward, we'll rely on it even more. And that's an important perspective. These financial studies talked about 70% of that $2.7 trillion being spent in a couple decades will be in the smallsat, CubeSat, microsat industry in low Earth orbit. So that's good for us in this part of the country here in the Southwest, because having an inland spaceport allows us to do certain things. That's also why there's so many other states that want to have spaceports. You know, my hat's off to Dave Ruppel in Colorado. They're the 11th licensed spaceport recently, as of last year, got their license, and there's some good innovative things that they'll be doing, you know, in the near future there at Front Range or Colorado Spaceport. But there's many other spaceports that have applications in around the nation, and a lot of that is because communities and counties see that this is a big economic engine, and when the right technologies exist, it makes sense for them to have a spaceport. Where we're at, Spaceport America, just a few miles south of us here in this beautiful Denver community, you go down I-25 and you get to the southern part of the state, right next to White Sands Missile Range, and you see that big blue thing right over the missile range there. Let me see if I've got a pointer. The red outline is the White Sands Missile Range. The blue is the airspace, and all that airspace is surface to unlimited, and it's controlled by Department of Defense. So what happens is none of the air traffic can go through there. So having a spaceport right under there gives us a neat opportunity to support a lot of the suborbital and low Earth orbit flights in the future out of that, because we have this beautiful restricted airspace over us that we don't have to compete like many other locations in the nations do with the NASA and the FAA, and dealing with clearing out Delta Airlines, American, United as they launch. And the FAA, you know, Dave and I are on a bunch of panels right now working with the FAA. We're going to fix the airspace access issues as they come up. The space community will be able to have much more reliable systems. But right now, as we work through that, we're in a good location to support the space community. And so here's some of the efforts that we're actually doing right now today. It was kind of interesting, you know, when I go around these last 2.5 years in this position, that we've already launched so many times from Spaceport America. A lot of people don't realize that, but it's companies like Up Aerospace and EXOS that are doing a majority of these commercial launches that we do there at Spaceport America. We've got a strong presence with the universities too, and as we go forward, having some of the great universities here in Colorado work with us, and in Arizona and the region. And I'm going to talk about a competition that they're already doing that in a few minutes. But what's neat is the excitement right now with these students, these young women and men that are getting ready to come into their career as they build rockets while they are doing their studies. A good example of that is New Mexico Tech, where they've actually built a capability, and they're taking that capability as a group of students and actually putting it into a business case, and they've got a company that's getting ready to launch a number of them out at Spaceport America. We're doing some exciting things with Boeing. Boeing's got the CST Starliner 100. It's where all the civil astronauts, NASA's astronauts, are going to be coming back either from the space station or the moon as they return. They're going to be returning in the Starliner, and that's going to land on land. Different than the Apollo days, right, where they landed in the water. Now NASA's future astronauts with this project is going to land on land, and they chose White Sands Missile Range as their primary and their secondary landing spot just because it's so big. Right now we're working with White Sands and Boeing to develop the capsule so the parachutes come out correctly. But they'll be doing some exciting things along with SpaceX and the Dragon capsule, and of course the Orion with Lockheed, and many other capabilities are being developed both by NASA and on the commercial side. I want to talk about SpinLaunch real quickly before I go into this Up Aerospace video. Talk about new technologies that just were recently able to get venture capital and funding. There's a lot of technologies out there as we go forward that we'll see that we can't even think of today necessarily. SpinLaunch is one that was conceived just a few years ago, where someone had an idea of spinning something up in a centrifuge, and you go faster and faster, and you get up to a speed that they were able to demonstrate in a lab environment of about a couple Mach numbers. So they're coming to the spaceport, and they're building up this centrifuge about 100 foot in diameter, and they expect to be able to get up to about Mach 5, 6 as they launch out of a short window and they're going to take this projectile initially into the ground, but they're going to turn it up and they're going to launch suborbital flights with a concept being maybe you don't need a rocket. You can just spin it so fast in the vacuum environment, it'll go up at a very high altitude, a little booster on it, and then you can get these low Earth satellites, some small sat, CubeSats. It's those type of technologies that are coming out that we're beginning to work on right now at Spaceport America that kind of excites me. There's a lot of small launch operators at various stages of development as they work through their rocket motor thrust testing, different types of unique capabilities that we couldn't have thought of just a few years ago. A lot of that is a reflection of where the processing power is. You know, you think about our cell phones, our smartphones that we have today. When we first had them about 12 years ago, they were kind of big things that you carried around. Now they're so small, and the power on them is more than what we had when we launched the man on the moon, which is kind of interesting to think about, that we have that type of computing power that small. Well, satellites are the same thing. There used to be these big ones, and some of them still need to be big if they have certain optics capabilities, but they're all shrinking and miniaturizing. So we have so many of these launch operators that are looking at the technologies in a different way, and we're excited about that. SpinLaunch is just one of the ones that we were just able to bring out to Spaceport America. Let me show you a quick video on Up Aerospace. It's kind of an exciting perspective on an experiment that they did for NASA. And NASA wanted to know, as they continue their exploration and they go to other planets like Mars, as the spacecraft enters that planet's gravity, how do you slow it down enough so you can safely bring a probe down to the surface? So in a very rarefied atmosphere of a planet like Mars, what type of design of your spacecraft can you slow it down as it orbits that planet? And so they had this kind of inverted umbrella design that they put on a payload that Up Aerospace launched here recently to see. They launched it up to about 450,000 feet. It came down in very rarefied atmosphere to look at how the effects of the loading on that structure was. So these are the type of experiments we're doing today in a suborbital world in support not only of NASA, but in support of the Mayo Clinic, in support of other types of commercial ventures. So let me show you this video.
Everybody, here we are on a beautiful September morning at Spaceport America, helping Up Aerospace prepare for their next rocket launch in support of their NASA Flight Opportunities program. We got quite a few visitors here from NASA, our local senator's office, and including even some folks from Holloman. This is a fantastic day, looking for a great launch. The skies are looking beautiful, weather's looking fantastic. It's going to be a great mission today.
We have some very high-profile NASA payloads on board. That brings in people from NASA headquarters, which is a very good thing for them to see that this spaceport has a lot to offer them for their future operations.
We could do multiple launches a day at the vertical launch area to be able to support suborbital or ultimately payloads to orbit.
All systems are go for launch. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
We've demonstrated to the world what our capabilities are for supporting these types of launches.
What this launch was today with Up Aerospace, with payloads from NASA and other customers, this is our 200th launch from the vertical launch area since we started launching here at Spaceport America in 2006. This is kind of where the new suborbital research community has really taken off. The space industry has really taken off.
We have some very high-profile NASA payloads on board. That brings in people from NASA headquarters, which is a very good thing for them to see that this spaceport has a lot to offer them for their future operations. We could do these at the rate of 1 or 2 a week quite easily if the demand is there for them.
That was just an example of kind of suborbital flights that we do to support whether it's civil space but also the commercial space sector. How many of you heard of Virgin Galactic and what Sir Richard Branson is getting ready to do? That's going to be exciting in a lot of ways. Right now there's like 580 humans that have been up in space. He's already got about 700 that have bought tickets to go up onto space in this wonderful capability I'll show you here in just a second, known as White Knight 2 in a Unity spaceship. And so pretty soon we'll have another 700, and then shortly they'll continue that. They've got spaceships 3 and 4 being built right now. So the neat thing about the time frame we're in is suborbital flights, more humans getting up into space, and it's not just tourism, it's also researchers having the ability to be up there in a short time with data real time coming back down that we'll be seeing. You may have heard Sir Richard announce that they're starting another relationship in the United Kingdom, another one in Italy. He's reaching out with this capability. So what I like about this is right now it's suborbital. You go up for about, takes about an hour to get to the altitude. The rocket launches you up to about a 6-minute experience in microgravity where you're weightless, and then you come back down. It takes about an hour and 15, hour and 30 minutes the whole flight. It's just the stepping stone to the next phase of humanity as we go from suborbital to point flights and other places beyond. So let me let you all see what Virgin Galactic is planning on doing. This is kind of it's a nice 5-minute dialogue from Sir Richard, but it shows where his vision is as he goes forward.
A letter to my grandchildren. My dad, your great-granddad, was an extraordinary man, full of wise words. He would often remind me that life is wonderful, and it is that simple truth which has driven me as I built businesses, raised my family, and embarked upon my many adventures. You are at the very start of life. It is an incredible gift, and it is there for the taking. It will deliver highs and lows, but by living it to the full, by always trying to do the right thing, by keeping a childlike sense of adventure, it will indeed be wonderful. I used to think of space as a destination, but I now realize it's a journey with some amazing milestones along the way. Your lives will be transformed by space, and it will give your generation the planetary perspective on which the future of humanity rests. That we're all in this together, fellow travelers on Spaceship Earth. Today we pass the most significant of them all, as our beautiful VSS Unity, along with the hopes and dreams of so many, became the first spaceship built for regular passenger service to put humans into space.
Seconds. 58 seconds. Motor shutdown. Mach 2.8.
Great motor burn, everybody. We're going to space, Richard.
2,000 feet. Welcome to space, community.
Check that out. We can see it up the scope. Spaceship Unity, welcome to space. Copy, base. $1 million view. Apogee.
Virgin Galactic has shown that when you set off on challenging but important adventures, exceptional people come forward to join the journey. People who are consistently by your side and on your side. People who share your dreams and people who help make them reality.
Rolling to the right. Complete.
As I watch Unity and her brave pilots soar upwards into space today, my vision blurred by tears, I could hear your great-granddad whisper once again in my ear. Life is indeed wonderful.
So there's a question a lot of people ask, okay, when is Sir Richard going to be flying? And I think he indicated, just to get ahead of a question, that when he made the announcement with Governor Lieutenant Grisham that they're moving their operations from Mojave to finish their flight test program this fall out in southern New Mexico at Spaceport America, that he expected to be flying within about a year of having his first flight and then getting into commercial operations where they start bringing all the other 700 humans that already have a reserve slot up into space. So that's going to be an awesome, not just for this community, but just for the whole world, as this starter gets us into point-to-point transportation as they go forward with their development. How many people have heard of Spaceport America Cup? So now I want to spend a couple thoughts on the future generation of our workforce. Spaceport America Cup is a intercollegiate rocket engineering competition where universities from all around the world come together to compete with their rockets. It started about 15 years ago in Green River, Utah. The University of Utah and the Alabama, both their rocket clubs, they were talking to each other and they said that their rocket was better than the others, and they said, well, let's prove it. And I think Utah actually won the first event, and then it kind of grew after that, and it grew so much that it got to be too big for Green River. So in 2016, we brought this IREC, this Intercollegiate Rocket Engineering Competition, to Spaceport America. And this last year, it's always the third week in June. So what's so exciting about all of you being here in the audience, you actually have a free invitation to come down the third week in June every year to Spaceport America to watch the future brain trust of the space sector come together and compete. It's a third week in June. This last year we just had it a few weeks ago. We had about 124 teams from around the world sign up, register. About 99 teams showed up out at the spaceport. The first day you'll see is in the convention center. I got a video I want to show you about it. It's so exciting. But it's neat to see. The thing that excites me the most about this competition is a collaboration that you see now between these university students around the world. And a part of that is a relationship with just the internet, right? And the access, the ability to collaborate so quickly with other peer groups that we really didn't have, many years ago. We do have that now, and it's exciting for me to see the collaboration and the innovation that's going on. So this is an exciting event. It takes a lot of volunteers and sponsors to pull it off. But let me show you this 2018 clip real quick. it gives you a perspective of the students as they go through their development of this competition. Starts off in the convention center, and then it gets out to launching out at Spaceport America.
You all have almost a sacred ability now to create things and to engineer things. Most people out there in the world don't have that ability to envision something and to use engineering to put it into a technical framework that will make it succeed based on the requirements that you set it. And so all of you are not just, you know, students or engineers, but you're creators. And the planet needs that in a big way right now. We need people who could go out there and design solutions for the biggest challenges that we have and to figure things out in a way that moves us forward. And you all have the tools to do that, and that's going to be super important for the future.
The school I go to is, of course, New Mexico State University, which is the local school, so it's pretty exciting that we're actually competing for the first time in this competition. It's just been a journey all year. I was here last year, and it was awesome, you know, awesome, but we didn't have a team. So I think the journey really started a year ago whenever the team started being created. We laid that foundation, we built it up from the ground, have amazing team that's passionate and ready to compete and looking forward to competing in the future as well.
I'm from Ryerson University, and we're from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Going to 30,000 feet.
So for the last 10 months, the Atomic Aggies is our first year competition. We've been working to get our level certifications for this exact moment, June 20th. So we're hoping to, you know, be one of the first teams on the launch pad. We're really excited to be here, and we're all here to make it so that 6.9 seconds that our motor burns up into 10,000 foot category is an exciting one.
My name's Curtis Eubank. I'm a judge at the 2018 IREC. Here we're watching the teams as they do all their procedures and final pre-flight checklists to judge their competence as they prepare for the first salvo here.
For us to witness that. Literally a full year of our lives were put into getting to that very day. And we learned a lot along the way, and then just to kind of see it go up in smoke in the sky was really hard to swallow.
Myself, I'm standing on the launch pad, which is 3 stories up above, you know, teams from across the world. And the second it fails, everyone's eyes turn and look up at the guy who pressed the button.
After we kind of got over our pride and looked back on it, you know, you can walk away and know that you learned something from that.
So we're back at it, and we'll just make another year of pushing ourselves to the absolute limit. And we're excited about that.
I want to congratulate you and celebrate all your accomplishments, not just this week, but obviously from looking at what everyone did, the hard work that went into this for the entire year. We understand at Blue that the ingenuity, teamwork, and determination that goes into building a rocket, and so we really commend you for those efforts. No matter the outcome of this week, you've still been successful. By testing those designs, you've gained some insight into how rockets and rocket engines perform, and that'll be invaluable to you as you move forward back to school or into your career.
Okay, team number 47, McGill, come on out. So the neat thing about that video, when you look at the students as they work through, most of them had great launches, but a lot of them had a launch just like New Mexico State, which I admit is my alma mater. It's where I went to college. I love those guys. But you learn more from things that sometimes don't go right than you do if something just goes really smooth. So that's kind of not only a lesson just in life, but particularly in the space sector. As you put yourself, as you accept risks, as you go forward and do things, it takes sometimes that learning environment before you really get to the next stage, the next level. And we're seeing that throughout the space industry. I'm going to show you another quick clip here for 2019 that we just did. This one's only about a minute long. The first year, University of Michigan won. Last year, a team from Canada won. And this year, 2019, University of Washington won the competition. All of you that competed throughout this competition, all the hard work that drove you to work together as a team, that got you to Spaceport America, every one of you, just to achieve that accomplishment of traveling on your journey throughout your hard work and coming together. All of you are a winner. 2019 winner of the Spaceport America Cup, I present to you the University of Washington.
Someone has been coming to this competition for 3 years. For me, this has been the biggest thing in my college career. I've been doing this all 4 years. Started off first week, I got to UW, finishing it strong now after graduation. This is my real diploma.
So I kind of wanted to end this discussion on just the future workforce, what I see coming up, which is so important to our nation, these young women and men, and the excitement that they have as they go through STEM fields. And it's not just STEM. A lot of these teams had finance, marketing, business kind of backgrounds too, which is what you're going to need as you go forward in a space environment as you continue exploration. So it's a total team sport, a team effort. So I'm really proud of these young students coming forward into the workforce. It's a fun activity. And again, that third week in June, please put it on your calendars as you look forward to your schedules next year. This just talks about the different categories that we do. In order to win the Spaceport America Cup, you have to come in first place in one of these 6 categories. Let me kind of close with a couple quick thoughts, and then I want to open it up for discussions. You know, as we go forward, we talked about the importance of humanity and our world, that we need to continue to explore space, and that's important. The perspective is it's going to take courage, it's going to take bravery, and it's going to be, as a nation, you know, sometimes accepting certain risk where it makes sense and being vulnerable. That's what really allows you to really explore and to grow as you go forward. But think about some of the things that will happen in the next few years in our lifetime. People on the moon, a permanent presence in 5 years. So my daughter, she's a junior in high school. Some of her friends last night went to the White Sands National Monument. Have any of you all been to White Sands National Monument before? Beautiful place, beautiful white sands. When a full moon comes up, they have these full moon series throughout the summer whenever there's a full moon coming up. And so she was out there with her friends looking at the full moon, and I was telling her, I said, you know, think about what'll happen in your lifetime. When you see that full moon come up, you'll just see a beautiful moon, but think of a new moon when the sun's light isn't casting on it. Just think in another few years, you're actually going to see lights shining up there, maybe binoculars or telescopes, but we'll see our human presence up on the moon, you know, in the night sky of a moon. That's kind of just, it's interesting to think about it that way, that in our lifetime, after millions of years of humans, you know, we'll actually be able to see something on the moon coming back to us. And then the other thought I'll leave you with is pretty soon we're going to be an interplanetary species, right? When we get to Mars, when we're successful and get on to that point of the exploration, that'll be exciting. So it's not just the point-to-point transportation that we'll be looking forward to, going around the globe, you know, in an hour or so, which is going to be exciting when you fly to Sydney, Hong Kong, Rome, you name it, in about an hour. That'll be exciting to be out of these space plane concepts that are coming up. The future of space is awesome. The commercial sector, the civil sector, the national security space initiatives, it's an exciting time to be, and I feel I've just got, you know, one of the most exciting jobs. So thank you for your attention. I'd like to open it up for questions from anybody in the audience. We've got about another 8 minutes before this hour sector, so please, I think Keisha's got a mic over there that if anybody has a question, and yeah, please.